Hello and welcome to World Talks here on TVP World with me, Ashim Kumar. Poland's Prime Minister Donald Tusk said on Tuesday that peace talks on the war in Ukraine could possibly start this winter. Friedrich Merz, the frontrunner in the race to become the next German chancellor, has called for a union of European countries and the US to move towards peace. Donald Trump has promised to bring peace to Ukraine in 24 hours. The momentum for peace seems to be growing, but how complex is the process? Well, to discuss this, I'm joined by Kurt Volker. He's Centre for European Policy Analysis and former US Ambassador to NATO. Mr. Volker, welcome, and thanks for taking the time. You have a very busy schedule ahead of you.
That's okay. It's great to be with you. Thank you.
Thank you for being here. Okay, so momentum for peace going on now. How do you see this kind of energy? Where's it coming from? Why now?
Well, a couple of things. First off, you have, of course, the new U.S. president coming in office next month, Donald Trump. He has said that he wants to and intends to end this war as quickly as possible. He's going to push for a settlement. He says he has a great relationship with Putin and will call him and tell him to stop the war. Okay, that's one impulse. Another thing that I think is incredibly important is just how weak Russia has become over the last couple of years. We see weakness in their economy with very high inflation, high interest rates, lack of access to finances for businesses and for travelers. We see weakness in their military. They are losing forces at an incredible rate and having a difficult time replacing them. Hence, they're bringing in North Koreans, they're bringing in Iranian drones, North Korean artillery, even reports of Houthis coming to fight in the Russian winter. So it is a difficult situation for Putin. So he may be ready to have a peace of some kind. And I also think the Ukrainians may be ready as well. They will never recognize Russia's occupation of their territory, but I think they are coming to realize that they don't have the means to evict Russia militarily now. And so they may be looking for a settlement that guarantees the security and democracy and prosperity in the heart of Ukraine for the future.
So the terms, the conditions seem reasonable for some kind of peace talks. But from the Russian perspective, is this peace or is this simply a ceasefire?
From the Russian perspective, purely just a ceasefire, if that. I was involved with dealing with the Minsk agreements, and Russia was a signatory and a participant in the Minsk agreements. By the time I got involved 3 years later, they denied that they were a signatory. And they said, no, this is only about the separatists and the Ukrainians. And so they claim to have no responsibilities. They will do something very similar. They are launching a kinetic war against Ukraine at the moment. They will continue to wage a hybrid war against Ukraine and other countries in the region, including Moldova, Romania, Bulgaria, Georgia, even after this. That's what we should understand, is that Putin is never going to give up on his own goals. He may temporarily recognize that his capabilities are limited and he needs to work on those. That should be our moment to lean in and provide greater opportunities and security for the countries in the region.
Okay, so moving to that leaning in process, what does that mean for Europe?
Well, I'd say first off, Europe has to step up on defense. This is something that the U.S. has been saying ever since I can remember. I started my career in the Reagan administration, and Reagan was complaining about Europe needing to spend more on defense and do more on defense. It's been a constant theme. But I think right now, if Europe is going to be peaceful and prosperous, it needs Ukraine to be peaceful and prosperous, and that means bringing Ukraine into European institutions, and Europe has to take the lead on that. What I hope is that we have a continued strong relationship between the United States and Europe where we support this, we do this together. But certainly under Donald Trump, there will be a push for Europe to spend more on defense, as Poland is already doing, and to lead on the integration of Ukraine and maintaining peace.
Right, okay, so let's start with defence. I mean, Poland's going to be taking over the presidency of the EU Council in January next year, and they've put security at the top of their agenda, which of course includes military materiel. How I mean, how quickly do you think they'll be in a position where Europe will be able to defend itself without US help?
Well, that's a tough question because on the one hand, you look at Europe with the financial resources, the scale, the number of people, the defense budgets, the defense industry. Europe has enormous capabilities already. So if you were comparing Europe to, say, Russia, like Russia's a fraction of what Europe is. On the other hand, Europe has not organized itself and committed its resources to providing a robust defense capability and defense establishment. It has talked a lot about it. There's a lot of intentionality, but so far it's not delivered. So the U.S. is still essential for things like air power, for enablers, for logistical support, supply lines, intelligence. So there are many things that the U.S. does that are kind of unique.
Right.
And I don't think Europe is going to be able to replace those. Frankly, we're talking many, many years. But that doesn't mean Europe should just forget it. It means Europe should methodically invest.
Right. Methodically invest, coordinate efforts, kind of makes sense. But they haven't done it before, as you said. Is this another Trump effect?
Well, it is. You know, if you think back to when Donald Trump was elected the first time, he took office in 2017. 2018, he had a NATO summit, and it kind of went haywire. But his main point was that there are 3 European countries spending what they had committed to on defense, which is 2% of GDP. And he said, this is unacceptable. The U.S. can't live with this. Why should we defend you if you're not willing to defend yourselves? Lots of threats there. I don't believe that the U.S. will pull out of NATO or fail to live up to security commitments to our NATO allies. But what he put on the table in terms of frustration of the United States and the demand that Europe spend more was very real. And you heard this not only from him, but from President Obama, from Secretary of Defense Robert Gates, who was Secretary of Defense in both Bush and Obama. It's a long-standing American point. And in the years since then, Europe has begun to spend more. There are now 24 countries in NATO that are spending at least 2% of GDP on defense. You can credit Putin with a lot of that because people are reacting to the violence that he's inflicted. But it is a reality that Europe has done better. But still, that means there are 8 countries in NATO that are not spending what they had committed to on defense.
Right. So what do you believe Poland's role is in getting this cohesion going within Europe and actually getting Europe to where it should be?
This is a great question because Poland has an almost unique opportunity in Europe. It is very well respected in the United States, including by President Trump and the Trump administration. You'll remember from his first term that he increased the U.S. involvement and presence in NATO bases and so forth in Poland. Poland is respected. It has the opportunity to say we are already spending well more than our share on defense. We are committed to this and we're capable with this. And to convince the U.S. to work with Europe to get to where Poland is and that Poland will help. And also to work within Europe to say we can't do what we've always done. We have to do better and we have to do more because we have a difficult situation in Europe. Russia's war against Ukraine, largest war in Europe since World War II, and a U.S. that is very impatient and frustrated, but we don't want to lose the U.S. So let's work together to figure out how we as Europeans can do better at this ourselves.
Right. So do you see Poland's role as perhaps being a bridge between U.S. and European efforts to build this cohesion?
Yeah, I hate to think of the idea of a bridge because it means you have 2 sides.
Right.
And they're opposites. What I'd rather think is that Poland has the ability to operate effectively with the United States and with countries in Europe, and therefore to actually lead a way that will be beneficial for Europe, European security, European democracy, for Ukraine, and also for the relationship with the United States.
Okay, now you mentioned earlier that peace for Europe, security for Europe depends on peace and security for Ukraine. Does that mean, for example, bringing Ukraine into the EU fold?
Absolutely. I think that we've crossed a line in the last couple of years. Obviously, there are standards for the EU, just as there are standards for NATO, even more strict with the EU. But we also have to think about the strategy. The EU was created in order to prevent future war between France and Germany or on the European continent. It was very successful, wildly successful. And it has built up all of these institutions, these capabilities, these expectations. But we're back at that stage now where we have to be thinking hard about what's the strategy to prevent future war. If we don't have Ukraine as a democracy, a secure, prosperous economy integrated within Europe, and capable of defense of itself so that it prevents future Russian attacks, there's going to be more war. And we don't want that. So we have to get back to this idea that Europe is not only all of the rules, it is also a strategic pursuit about peace.
Right. Okay, so Ukraine for the EU, yes. Now the big question, Ukraine for NATO, yes or no?
In my view, absolutely, yes, it must be in NATO.
Okay.
That is not a widely held view in the U.S. right now. The Biden administration dragged its feet on this over the last 4 years. The incoming Trump administration has indicated that they don't see bringing Ukraine into NATO for some time. I think that's a mistake. I think Putin is patient. I think he will use any time that's given him as an opportunity to rebuild and then attack again. And I think the only thing that deters Putin, the military strength that deters him, is NATO. We saw what happened with the Budapest Memorandum, where the US, UK, France, and Russia had all committed to protect Ukraine's territorial integrity. Russia flagrantly violated that, and nobody did anything. We see these bilateral security assurances that have been negotiated with Ukraine, and most of them are not legally binding, not treaties, no operational clauses. Some have sunset clauses. This is not going to convince Putin. I think the only thing that will convince Putin is actually NATO.
NATO and Article 5. Mr. Volker, thank you very much indeed for sharing your analysis with our audience. Have a good day.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. And that's all from us here on World Talks. Goodbye.